They made her sing as a joke, but her voice stunned the Alpha King. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Elara. The lanterns hanging above the moonlit square trembled in the early evening breeze, their warm glow swaying over a sea of wolves dressed in silk, velvet, and too much pride. Elara kept her eyes on the wooden planks beneath her feet as she moved across the edge of the stage, clutching a stack of folded linens against her chest. She'd spent the entire day scrubbing floors, polishing lantern glass, and fetching warm water for performers who didn't bother to thank her. An Omega didn't need gratitude, they said, just obedience. And Elara had given plenty of that. She kept her wolf silent, kept her voice hidden, kept her steps small enough that no one would notice her. That had always been the goal, stay invisible. But invisibility ended the moment 3 she-wolves, Lisa, Jana, and Marine, blocked her path behind the stage. Their dresses shimmered under the lantern light, and their smiles were sharp enough to cut. Elara, Lisa crooned, we need your help. Something special. Elara's pulse stumbled. I still have chores, relax, Jana laughed, grabbing the linens from her arms and tossing them aside. You won't need those. Marine hooked her fingers into Elara's sleeve and tugged her forward. The crowd is bored. We thought maybe you could entertain them. A ripple of unease slid down Elara's spine. Behind the curtains, she could hear the hum of the audience. Hundreds of wolves gathering for the annual Moonrise Showcase, waiting to impress the visiting Alpha King. Tonight was important. For everyone but her. I can't perform, Elara whispered. Exactly, Lisa grinned. That's what makes it funny. Before she could pull away, they shoved her onto the stage. The spotlight snapped open, a harsh white beam searing into her eyes. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by laughter. Is that an Omega? Someone called. What's she doing up there? Probably cleaning, another voice jeered. Let's see what talent she thinks she has. Elara's knees trembled. The wooden boards felt thin beneath her boots, as if one wrong breath might splinter them. She had not stood on a stage since she was 10, humming lullabies her mother taught her. Back when she believed her voice meant something. Back before life silenced it. Lisa's voice cut through the darkness. Go on, Elara. Sing for us. The audience roared with cheering that wasn't cheering at all. It was the noise of wolves circling something wounded. Elara's throat tightened. I don't sing, someone barked. And the crowd echoed it, a chant swelling with cruelty. Her fingers curled against her palms. Her heart hammered. She could run. She should run. But as she prepared to flee, a soft memory brushed her mind. The sound of her mother's voice, warm and steady on cold winter nights. When the world is loud, she used to say, sing anyway. Elara inhaled, trying to steady her shaking breath. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at a single lantern swinging in the wind. And then she sang. Her voice slipped out quiet at first, barely more than a tremble. A fragile thread of sound weaving through the laughter. But as she followed the melody she had memorized years ago, something inside her loosened, something small and golden that she'd locked away for too long. Her voice rose, soft but sure, stretching across the stage like moonlight on water. The laughter faltered. A hush crawled across the square. Elara leaned into the final note, a pure, bright tone that tightened her own throat with emotion. And in that silence, she felt it. Felt a presence heavy as a storm cloud rolling across the crowd. A ripple of dominance pressed through the air, powerful enough to make wolves straighten instinctively. From the far end of the square, a tall figure moved through the lantern glow, cloaked in black, eyes like winter steel. The Alpha King, Caelum, had arrived early, and he was staring at her as if her voice had reached across the night and wrapped around his throat. Her last note faded. The entire square stopped breathing. And the Alpha King kept walking toward the girl who was never supposed to stand on a stage. The crowd did not breathe as Alpha King Caelum crossed the lantern-lit square, the air tightening with every step. He took. Elara could not move, her feet rooted to the wooden boards as if the final note of her song had stitched her in place. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, too loud, too human against the absolute silence spreading around her. She had never seen the Alpha King this close. Stories painted him in shadows and winter steel, a ruler whose presence alone made seasoned warriors drop to their knees. Yet now, as he approached the stage, Elara sensed something else beneath the power that wrapped around him like a living storm. It was focus, sharp, singular, fixed entirely on her. Caelum stopped at the edge of the stage. The lanterns above him flickered, their light catching in his silver eyes. For a terrifying moment, he simply stood there, saying nothing. Elara could feel the crowd waiting, trembling between curiosity and fear. Lisa, Jana, and Marine lingered behind the curtains, their makeup-painted faces suddenly pale. Everyone knew what it meant when a king's attention landed on someone, especially someone like her. Caelum lifted his chin slightly. Who put her on this stage? His voice was not loud, but it carried with a weight that pressed against every ribcage in the square. No one answered. The silence stretched, brittle as ice over a winter lake. Elara swallowed, her hands trembling at her sides. She could not let someone else take the blame for mocking her, even if they deserved it. I did not mean to perform, she whispered. They told me to sing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Elara forced herself to speak again, her throat tight. They thought it would be a joke. Caelum's eyes did not leave her, not even for a second. A joke, he repeated, the word flat and dangerous. For a moment, Elara thought he would turn toward the pack and unleash the fury everyone whispered about in night stories. But instead, something else flickered across his expression, something she could not name. He stepped onto the stage. His boots struck the wood with a firm, measured thud. Elara's breath hitched. The Alpha King was now only a few feet away. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a stark contrast to the cold authority that usually surrounded him. He removed his cloak and draped it lightly across her shoulders. The fabric was heavy and warm, smelling faintly of pine, cold air, and something unearthly that made her chest tighten. Gasps erupted from the audience. An Omega did not wear a king's cloak. Ever. Caelum did not acknowledge their shock. He spoke only to her. You should not be shaking, he said quietly. Your voice did not shake. Elara blinked, stunned. I have not sung in years. You should never have stopped. His tone was low, steady, almost reverent. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not about anything. Caelum straightened, letting his gaze sweep the crowd at last. His dominance rolled outward like a slow thunder, silencing whispers instantly. Mocking a wolf for entertainment is a stain on any pack, he announced. Mocking one with a gift, his eyes returned to Elara, and something softened there, is an insult to the goddess herself. A collective intake of breath followed. Wolves shifted uneasily. Even the wind seemed to hold itself still. Elara felt lightheaded, as if she had stepped into someone else's life entirely. She opened her mouth, unsure what she meant to say, but Caelum lifted a hand gently, stopping her. Not here, he said softly. Not while you are shaking. Before she could respond, he offered his arm. To her. The forgotten Omega. The girl who had not been meant to sing. Walk with me, he said. I want to hear the truth from you alone. The crowd parted without a word as the Alpha King guided Elara down from the stage, his cloak still wrapped around her like a shield. And as she stepped beside him, the whispers began, fearful, shocked, and tinged with something else entirely. Elara had spent her life trying to stay invisible. Now the entire square watched every breath she took beside the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. Elara walked beside Alpha King Caelum as the crowd silently parted, the weight of 100 eyes pressing against her back, while the warmth of his cloak anchored her trembling shoulders. The lanterns grew dimmer as they moved away from the stage and toward the quiet edge of the moonlit square where shadows softened the noise of the festival. Elara kept her gaze low, every step feeling unreal, like she was drifting through a dream she was not meant to enter. Caelum slowed his pace, clearly noticing how tense she remained. You are safe here, he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. No one will touch you while I am beside you. Elara swallowed hard, unsure how to respond to that kind of assurance from a king, especially when she had spent her whole life being treated as if she were barely worth noticing. They stopped beneath a tall iron lantern post where the light glowed steady and warm. Caelum turned to face her fully. Up close, he was even more intimidating, his presence vast, his posture controlled, his eyes sharp and intensely focused. Yet there was something gentler beneath all of it, something curious, almost searching. "Tell me," he said, "why did you hesitate before you sang?" Elara gripped the edges of his cloak around her, drawing in a shaky breath. "Because I knew they wanted to laugh at me," she whispered. "I knew they wanted a show, not a song." Caelum's jaw tightened. "That was not a show." Elara shook her head quickly. "I did not mean it like that. I meant they wanted to humiliate me, and I did not want to give them more reasons." Caelum's expression shifted, the hard lines of his face softening with something that looked like anger but not directed at her. "You were forced." "Yes," she murmured. "But I chose to sing. My mother taught me when I was young. She told me singing helps the heart remember it is still alive." Caelum's eyes narrowed slightly, thoughtful and intent. "Your mother was wise." Elara blinked, caught off guard by the kindness in his tone. She nodded slowly. "She died when I was 13. After that, I stopped singing." Caelum studied her in silence for several seconds, as if piecing together something she could not see. "Your voice," he said quietly, "carries strength even when you are afraid. That is rare among wolves. Fear often silences us." Elara felt heat rise in her cheeks. No one had ever spoken of her voice with anything more than mockery or pity. The idea that an alpha king, this alpha king, heard strength in it made her chest tighten with emotion she did not have words for. "I did not mean to draw attention," she whispered. "I just wanted it to stop hurting." Caelum nodded once, slowly, as if the truth in her words mattered more than anything happening in the festival beyond them. "Elara," he said, his tone deepening, "I need to know one more thing. Why did your voice sound as if it carried sorrow that does not belong to a girl your age?" Elara hesitated, her lips parting without sound at first. She had spent years hiding that ache, burying it beneath chores, silence, and an Omega's instinct to endure. "Because," she finally said, "sorrow is the one thing no one can take from you. They can mock you. They can shove you aside. They can make you feel small. But sorrow is yours. And when you sing, it becomes something else." Caelum exhaled slowly, and for the first time, his gaze broke from its strict composure. There was a flicker of recognition there, a mirror of something he carried but never showed. "You speak as if you have lived more than your years." "Sometimes," Elara whispered, "a quiet life still hurts." Caelum stepped closer, and the heat of him wrapped around her like a second cloak. "I heard that hurt tonight," he said, "and I will not allow anyone to cause it again." Before Elara could understand his meaning, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. A wolf in gray armor bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, the council requests your presence. They say it is urgent." Caelum did not take his eyes off Elara for several long seconds. Then, in a voice calm but absolute, he answered, "They can wait." The guard blinked, shocked, but obeyed without question. Elara stared up at Caelum, breath caught. The Alpha King had chosen to stay. For her. And as the distant festival lights flickered around them, she realized her life had just crossed a line it could never return from. Elara stood frozen beneath the lantern light, the night air brushing against her cheeks as Alpha King Caelum remained beside her instead of returning to his council. She had never imagined a world where a king would delay his own advisors, yet here he was, his attention steady and unyielding. The weight of it made her pulse race. Caelum studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, as if he was searching for something he had not expected to find. "You said you stopped singing because it hurt too much," he murmured. "But tonight, when you sang, you did not sound broken. You sounded brave." Elara shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was not brave. I was terrified." Caelum stepped closer. She could feel the warmth of him even through the heavy cloak draped across her shoulders. "Courage is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is doing something despite it." His words landed deep inside her, stirring emotions she did not want to name. Before she could respond, laughter echoed from the far side of the square. Lisa, Jana, and Marine appeared, their perfect hair and perfect smiles stiff from panic. Their eyes darted between Elara and Caelum, disbelief twisting their features. Caelum's jaw tightened at the sight of them. "Those three," he said quietly, "were they the ones who forced you onto the stage?" Elara instinctively stepped back. "Please, do not confront them. They will only make things worse." Caelum's eyes sharpened, cold and focused. "For whom?" Elara swallowed hard. She knew the answer but could not speak it, not without feeling small again. Caelum took one step forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her as the three girls approached. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. It was an alpha's instinct to shield. Lisa attempted a curtsy, though her hands trembled. "Your Majesty, we did not realize you were watching the performance. We were only trying to make the audience laugh. You know how festivals can be." Caelum did not blink. Mocking an Omega is not entertainment. His voice carried the quiet threat of thunder. Jana forced a smile. "We did not mean any harm. It was all in good fun." Caelum's eyes darkened. A wolf who harms another and calls it fun is a coward. The girls paled. The entire square seemed to shrink away from the king's words. Marine tried to redirect the blame with a shaky voice. "It was Elara's decision to sing, Your Majesty. She stepped forward on her own. We did not force her." Caelum turned slightly, just enough to see Elara without removing his attention from the girls. "Is that true?" Elara's throat tightened. She hated confrontation, hated being the center of attention. But she also remembered her mother's words, and the way her voice finally felt alive again. "They pushed me," she said softly. "They pushed me in front of everyone, and I sang because I did not want to be humiliated any further." Lisa gasped. "She is lying." Caelum silenced her with a single raised hand. "I can smell fear," he said coldly. "And yours reeks of guilt." All three girls stiffened as though struck. No one dared speak. The square fell into a deeper silence than before, the tension thick enough to choke on. Caelum stepped fully in front of Elara now, a shield of power and authority. "Hear me clearly," he said, his voice carrying across the lantern-lit festival. "If any wolf in this pack tries to harm this Omega again, physically or otherwise, they will answer to me." Shock rippled through the crowd. No one could remember the last time an Alpha King publicly singled out an Omega for protection. Lisa, Jana, and Marine lowered their heads, retreating with stiff, terrified steps. Caelum did not watch them go. Instead, he turned back to Elara, his gaze softer now, though still intense. "You should never have been treated that way," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever." Elara felt her breath tremble. "Why do you care?" Caelum's answer came without hesitation. "Because your voice woke something in me that I thought was long dead, and I do not ignore what the goddess chooses to awaken." Elara stared at him, speechless, as the meaning behind his words settled into her bones. Whatever had begun when she sang was no simple moment. It was a shift, a beginning, a spark that neither she nor the king could step away from now. The lanterns of the moonlit square burned lower as the night deepened, their soft amber glow brushing the edges of Elara's vision while her thoughts spun in frantic circles. Alpha King Caelum's final words still echoed inside her, unsettling and impossible to ignore. He stood before her, expression steady, as if he had not just shifted the course of her entire life with a single sentence. Elara could barely breathe. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "whatever you think you heard in my voice, it was not meant for someone like you to notice." Caelum tilted his head slightly, studying her with a focus that prickled across her skin. "Someone like me?" Elara hesitated, then nodded. "Kings do not listen to Omegas. At least not for reasons that matter." Caelum stepped closer, his shadow merging with hers on the stone path. "I do not care for what tradition demands. I care for truth. And the truth is that when you sang, it reached me." Elara's breath hitched. She felt exposed, as if he had peeled away every layer she had spent years hiding behind. Before she could respond, the faint sounds of the festival drifted toward them again, blending laughter, music, and the murmurs of uneasy wolves still reeling from the king's public defense of an Omega. Caelum glanced toward the crowd, his posture shifting subtly, becoming the warrior king the realm whispered about. "This place is too public," he said quietly. "Walk with me a moment longer." Elara followed without protest, her steps small and uncertain as Caelum guided her away from the square and toward a quieter path lined with tall pines. The night breeze carried the scent of needle and earth. It steadied her heartbeat enough to form words again. "Why did you stay?" she asked. "Your council needed you." Caelum's answer was immediate. "I needed to understand why your voice felt familiar." Elara turned her head sharply. "Familiar? You have never heard me sing before." "Not with my ears," Caelum murmured. "But my wolf recognized something. A pull. A resonance." Elara's pulse stumbled. "Resonance." Caelum stopped walking, turning toward her beneath a break in the pines where moonlight spilled across the path in a pale silver ribbon. Every wolf carries a frequency, an imprint of their soul. When yours reached me, it felt as though it threaded itself into mine. Elara's fingers tightened around the edge of his cloak. She had heard stories of rare wolves whose voices held healing or power, but those tales belonged to legends told around fires, not to girls who scrubbed floors and stayed out of sight. Your Majesty, she whispered, I am just an Omega. Caelum shook his head slowly. You keep saying that, as if it defines you. But my instincts do not respond to rank, they respond to truth. And the truth is that my wolf has not reacted to anything like this in years. Elara's heart hammered painfully. How can you know that this feeling means anything? Caelum held her gaze, his voice dropping. Because my wolf is never wrong. The world seemed to tilt. For a moment, all Elara could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat and the soft rustle of pine branches above them. She did not know what to say, and Caelum did not force her to speak. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice until it brushed gently against the shell of her fear. Elara, I do not want you to be afraid of what tonight means. I am not afraid of you, she whispered. I am afraid of what your attention will cost me. Caelum's expression shifted, darkening with something protective and fierce. Then understand this clearly. Whatever comes, you will not face the cost alone. His words hit something deep inside her, something she had buried years ago to survive the pack's cruelty. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. A breathless guard bowed quickly. Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. The council insists that the matter is urgent. They beg for your presence. Caelum's jaw flexed, frustration clear. But he turned to Elara first. I will return for you when I am finished. Elara stared at him, stunned. Return for me? Yes, he said simply. Stay near the lantern path. I do not want you wandering alone tonight. His voice softened just slightly. And Elara, do not disappear. Before she could answer, he walked toward the council hall with a stride that made every wolf instinctively clear a path. Elara stood beneath the moonlight, his cloak still wrapped around her shoulders, her pulse trembling with the terrifying truth she could no longer ignore. Nothing about her life would ever be the same again. Elara remained beneath the tall pines, the Alpha King's cloak resting across her shoulders like a shield she had never earned, her thoughts tumbling in frantic, uneven circles. The night air felt colder without Caelum standing beside her, as if his presence had held back the chill. Lanterns flickered along the path, their golden glow casting long shadows that wavered with her trembling breaths. She tried to steady herself, but the memory of Caelum's words pressed against her mind with disarming weight. He had said he would return for her. No one had ever returned for her, not once in her entire life. The festival continued in the distance, muffled by trees and the quiet that always followed the Alpha King's departure. Wolves whispered in corners, stealing glances in her direction, but no one dared approach her. Not when she still wore the king's cloak. Elara wrapped the fabric tighter around her, not because of the cold, but because it reminded her of how his eyes had softened when he spoke. She did not understand why her voice had reached him, or why he seemed so determined to protect her, but the truth pulsed inside her with terrifying clarity. Something had shifted between them, and it was not something she could undo. Suddenly, twigs snapped behind her. Elara spun, her heart leaping into her throat, expecting Caelum or perhaps one of his advisors. Instead, Lisa, Janna, and Marine emerged from the shadows, their faces twisted with resentment beneath the painted smiles they wore earlier. Lisa raised a hand before Elara could speak. Save your breath. We are not here to apologize. Janna stepped closer, her eyes sharp with malice. You embarrassed us in front of the entire pack. And the Alpha King, Marine hissed. Especially him. Elara took a step back, aware of how vulnerable she looked standing alone in the dim glow. I did not intend to embarrass anyone, she said softly. I only sang because you wanted attention, Lisa snapped. You are nothing, Elara. A servant. An Omega with no wolf strong enough to matter. Her voice grew colder. Yet suddenly the Alpha King notices you. Suddenly he puts his cloak on you. Marine's eyes blazed with jealousy. Do you think you deserve that? Elara shook her head quickly. I did not ask for any of this. But you received it, Janna spat. And now people will think you are special. The word special dripped with venom. Elara's pulse raced. She took another step back, but her heels brushed against the roots of a pine tree. Lisa advanced, lowering her voice into a chilling whisper. You should have stayed invisible, Elara. You should have known your place. Before Lisa could say another word, a growl shattered the silence. It was not loud, but it was low, sharp, and filled with enough warning to freeze the blood of every wolf present. Elara felt the vibration before she recognized the sound. Caelum stepped from the shadows behind the girls, his presence hitting the clearing like a shockwave. His eyes were not silver now. They were darker, edged with primal fury. I told you to stay away from her. His voice carried the force of a command, even though it never rose above a quiet tone. Lisa, Jana, and Marine dropped instantly into shallow bows, their bravado collapsing under the weight of his authority. Caelum did not spare them a glance. His focus was entirely on Elara. He moved to her side in 2 strides, placing himself between her and the girls. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Are you hurt? He asked. Elara shook her head, unable to steady her voice. No, Your Majesty. They only what? Caelum asked, though his voice already carried the edge of someone who knew the answer. Elara hesitated. She did not want more trouble. They were upset. Caelum exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders tight as coiled steel. Their emotions are irrelevant. Their actions are not. He turned his gaze toward the girls, and they flinched. Leave, he ordered. Before you force me to decide consequences you will not survive. The girls fled without a word, their footsteps cracking through the underbrush as if chased by their own fear. Caelum waited until they were gone before turning fully toward Elara. I told you not to disappear, he said quietly. Elara swallowed hard, her voice trembling. I was not trying to. They cornered me. Caelum's expression softened just slightly. And that is why I said you should not wander alone tonight. His voice lowered even further. I will not allow anything to happen to you. Elara stared at him, her heart pounding, as the realization settled into her chest like a flame catching fire. Caelum had not just defended her. He had come back for her. And in the darkness of the lantern path, she finally understood that whatever was pulling him toward her was no accident. It was destiny beginning to take shape. Elara felt her breath catch as Caelum stepped closer, his presence filling the narrow clearing beneath the lantern glow. The soft rustle of pine branches above them did nothing to soften the weight of the moment. It pressed against her skin like the warmth of a fire she did not know how to stand too near. Caelum's eyes, still shadowed with the remnants of anger, softened when they met hers. You should not have been alone, he said quietly. Not after what happened tonight. Elara's fingers tightened around the edges of his cloak. I did not expect them to follow me, she whispered. I thought they would avoid me after you defended me in the square. Caelum let out a low breath. Not quite a sigh, but something close. Wolves who feel their pride threatened can be reckless. And those 3 are afraid of what your presence means. Elara blinked, startled. My presence. Caelum tilted his head in. A slow, deliberate motion that sent a small shiver through her. You still do not understand, do you? He murmured. Everything changed the moment you sang. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. I did not try to change anything, she said softly. I only wanted the humiliation to stop. And that is exactly what made your voice powerful, Caelum replied. It was honest. His words lingered in the air, heavy and warm. Elara felt her pulse thrum beneath her skin, too fast and too loud. Caelum's voice lowered. There are very few things left in this world that can still reach me. But your voice did. Elara's heart stuttered. She did not know what to do with a king's attention, much less with a confession like that. Before she could gather a response, Caelum's hand lifted slightly, as if approaching her cheek, but he stopped himself. Even holding back, the gesture sent a tremor through her. You are trembling, he said. Is it because of them? No, Elara whispered. I mean partly, but not entirely. Caelum's brow furrowed in quiet concern. Then what? Elara swallowed. You. The word escaped before she could stop it. Caelum froze, not in shock, but in the stillness of a wolf who has just heard the truth he has been waiting for. His voice softened into something she had never heard from an alpha king. Elara, he said, I would never harm you. I know, she replied quickly. That is not why I am trembling. Moonlight spilled across his face, illuminating the sharp lines of his jaw and the hint of warmth breaking through his usual steel-like expression. Then why? Elara drew a breath that felt too big for her lungs. Because I do not understand why someone like you would care what happens to someone like me. Caelum stepped closer, the air between them tightened. Do not diminish yourself, he said. Not in front of me. She looked up at him, the fear and wonder in her chest tightening together until they were indistinguishable. But I am just an omega, she said. No matter what you say, that will always be the truth. Caelum shook his head slowly. Rank does not define worth. It only defines roles. And roles can change. The way he said it made her breath falter. He leaned in slightly, enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath against the cool night air. Tell me the truth, Elara. What did you feel when you sang tonight? She hesitated. The answer was too raw to admit, too delicate to expose to a king. But his gaze never wavered, steady and patient, and somehow tender. Finally, she spoke. I felt alive, she whispered. For the first time in years, I felt alive. Caelum's jaw relaxed, something relieved settling in his eyes. Then I am grateful you sang, he murmured. Even if the circumstances were cruel. He paused, his voice lowering further. I want to help you remember that feeling. Not just tonight, but as many nights as it takes. Elara's pulse tripped over itself. Why? Caelum looked at her as if the answer should have already been clear. Because my wolf recognizes something in you, he said. Something that was always meant to cross my path. Before she could respond, voices carried from the distant square, calling the Alpha King's name urgently. Caelum closed his eyes briefly, clearly frustrated at being summoned again. When he opened them, his tone held a promise. I will not let anyone hurt you, he said. And I will not let tonight be the last time we speak. He began to step back, but his hand brushed hers, deliberate and warm. Stay where the lanterns reach, he murmured. I will return. And then he was gone, leaving Elara beneath the silver-threaded moonlight, her heart racing with a truth she was only beginning to understand. Elara stood alone beneath the lanterns after Caelum disappeared into the night, her heart still trembling with the echo of his touch. The clearing felt different now, as if the air itself remembered the moment between them and held its breath, waiting for what would come next. She tightened the king's cloak around her shoulders, feeling its weight settle like a promise. She had worn many things in her life, threadbare aprons, patched dresses, hand-me-down shawls, but nothing had ever felt like this. Nothing had ever felt chosen. As minutes passed, the sounds of the festival began to fade. Wolves returned to their homes, lights dimmed, and the moonlit square slowly grew quiet. Elara stayed where Caelum told her to stay, though her legs felt unsteady and her mind spun with far too many questions. Her voice had reached him. Her presence unsettled him. His wolf recognized something in her. She pressed a shaking hand against her chest, trying to steady the restless pounding beneath her ribs. Elara had never believed in destiny, not for herself. But tonight, every moment seemed touched by it. A sudden rustling came from behind her. Elara spun quickly, expecting Caelum, but instead found Beta Rowan, the king's second-in-command, emerging from the tree line. His stance was stiff, his face carved with disapproval. Omega Elara, he said, his tone clipped. The king has tasked me with ensuring your safety until he returns. Elara nodded, though something in his voice made her uneasy. I did not ask for any special treatment, she murmured. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Yet you are receiving it. His gaze flicked to the cloak wrapped around her shoulders, and his jaw tightened. You should remove that before anyone else sees. Elara's fingers curled protectively around the fabric. He told me to keep it on. Rowan exhaled sharply, frustration tightening his posture. The king is not himself tonight. You would be wise not to misinterpret his attention. Elara lifted her chin slightly, a quiet defiance stirring in her chest. I am not misinterpreting anything. I am simply listening to what he said. Rowan's expression hardened. Then listen to me now. The king's interest in you is temporary. It is born from novelty, not purpose. The words hit like a cold slap, but Elara refused to look away. You do not know what he felt, she whispered. Rowan stepped closer, his eyes sharp with warning. I know the king better than anyone in this realm. He does not get attached. He does not get distracted. And he does not choose omegas. Elara's breath trembled. She had feared as much, yet hearing it spoken aloud stung deeper than she expected. Rowan continued, his voice low. He has a duty to the realm, a mate worthy of a throne, a Luna who strengthens alliances. An Omega from a minor pack does not fit into that equation. Elara looked at the ground, her chest tightening painfully. I never asked to fit into any equation, she whispered. I never asked for any of this. Yet here you stand wearing his cloak, Rowan shot back. Every wolf within 10 miles will sense it. You will attract envy, resentment, and danger you are not prepared to face. Elara swallowed. But it was his decision, not mine. Rowan's tone softened only slightly. And decisions made in moments of emotion are rarely wise. I am telling you this to protect the king, and to protect you. Whatever bond you think you felt tonight, it is better to release it now before it becomes something that cannot be undone. His words settled like cold ashes across her skin. Elara lowered her head, unable to form a response. She felt foolish for hoping, foolish for letting her heart flutter at the sound of Caelum's voice or the warmth in his eyes. Perhaps she had imagined everything. Perhaps loneliness had made her see meaning where there was none. Rowan watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. Good, he said quietly. You understand. Now return to the edge of the square and wait for the king like he asked. I will remain nearby. He turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving her once again with the lantern light and the crushing silence of doubt. Elara stood there, clutching the cloak that no longer felt like a promise but a question she could not answer. She did not hear Caelum's footsteps approaching from behind, nor did she see the shadow of fury in his eyes as he overheard every word Rowan had spoken. She had no idea that the truth was about to shift once more, in a way neither she nor the king could ignore. Elara did not hear the first snap of branches behind her, nor the soft crunch of boots on the pine needles. She only felt the weight of Rowan's words sinking deeper into her chest, spreading doubt like a slow, cold tide. She clutched the cloak tighter, her breath trembling as if the fabric itself might slip away and take every fragile hope with it. When Caelum finally stepped into the lantern light, his presence struck the clearing with the force of a thunderclap. He did not speak at first. He simply stood there, the moon catching in his silver eyes. A storm gathered behind them. Rowan emerged from the shadows a heartbeat later, his posture rigid when he realized the king had heard everything. Your Majesty, Rowan began, bowing deeply. I did not mean any disrespect. I was only quiet. Caelum's voice cracked through the air, soft but deadly. Rowan's mouth snapped shut. Caelum stepped forward, his gaze locked on Elara. Did you believe him? He asked, his voice low, stripped of every royal veneer. Elara swallowed hard. She did not know how to answer. She did not want to lie, but she did not want to anger him either. I do not know what to believe, she admitted. Caelum moved closer, slow and deliberate, until the lantern glow framed him in gold. Then let me make it clear, he said. I do not give my cloak to someone I do not value. Elara's breath hitched. Caelum continued, his tone deepening. And my wolf does not respond to someone by accident. Rowan stiffened. Your Majesty, you cannot mean. Caelum turned to him, the air thickening with dominance, so sharp it silenced even the wind. You forget your place, Rowan. You speak of what a king should or should not choose, but you forget that I am the one who chooses. Rowan bowed again, more slowly this time, uncomfortable and unsure. I only meant to protect the kingdom's future. The kingdom's future, Caelum said, is not your burden to decide. Elara watched, her heart thundering at the raw intensity in Caelum's voice. He turned back to her, and the storm in his expression softened into something fierce and unguarded. Elara, he murmured, do not let another voice drown out what you felt tonight. Her throat tightened. I felt many things, she whispered. Caelum stepped closer. Tell me one. Elara looked up at him, the truth trembling on her lips. I felt seen. Something inside Caelum broke open at her words. He lifted a hand, slowly enough for her to pull away if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Good, he whispered. Because I see you clearly. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. Your Majesty, the council is waiting. There are matters that cannot be delayed. Caelum did not break eye contact with Elara. They will wait another moment. His attention dipped to the cloak wrapped around her shoulders. Keep it, he said. Tonight, and every night you feel small. It will remind you that someone in this world sees your worth. Elara's breath shook, her eyes stinging with an emotion too warm to hold back. But why me? Caelum exhaled, not with frustration, but with the quiet surrender of someone accepting something greater than reason. Because when you sang, something inside me answered, he said. And I have not heard that answer in years. His fingers brushed her cheek one last time before. He stepped back, reclaiming the mantle of the king even as his gaze remained impossibly tender. This is not the end of tonight, he promised. Only the beginning. Rowan approached carefully. Your Majesty, Caelum lifted a hand to silence him. Ensure her safe passage home. And if anyone touches her, speaks to her, or looks at her with anything less than respect, I will know. Rowan bowed, chastened. Caelum looked at Elara one final time. Elara, he said softly, do not fear what is awakening. It was always meant for you. Then he turned and walked back toward the council hall, the moonlight following him like a loyal shadow. Elara stood beneath the lantern glow, the cloak warm around her, her heart steadying with every breath. For the first time in her life, she did not feel invisible. She felt chosen, and destiny, quietly and unmistakably, had begun to sing back to her.